Hello and welcome to another Fantasy Premier League video. My name is Steve, and if you caught my video earlier this week, you'll know that I had already made the decision to sell Quansah. Now, as it turns out, I did actually have to act quickly on this move and sell Quansah yesterday before his price dropped to 4.4 million, as you can see on screen here. So today's video will discuss my shortlist of 4.5 million defenders that I selected my replacement from, and of course who I ended up bringing in yesterday. But additionally, I've now also had the chance to sit down and watch the City versus Chelsea fixture. Well, actually, Chelsea versus City fixture, because Chelsea were at home, like I mentioned earlier this week. And I have a much more severe warning for all the Nkunku owners out there. I do think his days of starting for Chelsea are numbered. So before we jump into it, remember to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel, especially if you get any value out of the following content. And as always, I've put the various timestamps below so you can jump through to the sections that interest you the most. Right, so Quansah out. So if you didn't catch my video earlier this week, I did make the decision to sell Quansah, but I hadn't yet decided on my replacement. Now, I'm not going to rehash old ground and explain why I chose to sell Quansah. But part of the strategy of putting as much money onto the pitch as possible and playing with a really weak bench at the start of the season is that you do have to act quickly when you're caught with injuries or surprise benchings, or in this case, an early substitution, which came at half time. Now, thankfully, I did see the price drop coming, and so I did make the move yesterday before Quansah dropped to 4.4 million. Otherwise, I'd be in a bit of a pickle right now, as I would only be able to downgrade to a 4.0 million defensive asset, as I had no money in the bank. Or I could have potentially played Barco off the bench, who did not get any minutes in game week 1. Or alternatively going with Howard Bellis at Southampton, who has an okay fixture at home against Nottingham Forest. But I do not plan to play Howard Bellis at all unless absolutely necessary. If I wasn't going to do that, the only other option was taking a hit. So as you can see, this strategy does require immediate moves in some circumstances, and it is a much more hands-on style of play with a bit of added risk, because if you do not catch these price drops, it can be very detrimental to the squad. Now, I think that this risk is worth it, as it does mean I get to maximize my investment on the pitch, hopefully catching a few more of the better players and their price rises throughout the first game weeks of the season. So anyway, my hand was forced early, and I have made one transfer of a 4.5 million defender as my first transfer in game week 2, which is not ideal. But this is part of the risk in trying to buy a player who is working their way into the team. Now, my replacement is not actually the player that seems to be the front runner for most of the content creators out there, or the one that was probably most recommended to me in the comments on my video earlier this week. So we will go through the list now. So on my 4.5 million short list, the Villa lads of Konsa and Torres were actually already on the short list of potential replacements from preseason, as I was a little bit worried about putting Quansah into the squad, knowing that he may not secure that spot. However, I did think that Quansah would make it to at least 2 game weeks in Villa happened to be playing Arsenal in game week 2. So it's about one of the worst weeks you could be looking to bring in a Villa asset. Now, Villa's fixtures look glorious from game week 3 for about the next 7 fixtures or so. They're currently 4th on my fixture ticker with Arsenal this week, but then it's Leicester away, Everton home, Wolves home, and Ipswich away. That's a really good run of 4 fixtures. Man United at home might be a little bit tough from a defensive standpoint, but then Fulham away and Bournemouth at home. So they've actually got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's a pretty decent run of 7 fixtures. However, I am a bit worried about Villa's squad depth, especially considering their involvement in the Champions League this season. Now, Newcastle struggled with this last season, and it definitely took a toll on the players as they did look a lot more fatigued as soon as those midweek fixtures kicked in. Now, additionally, the new format of the Champions League looks like it might require stronger teams to be fielded in those midweek matches, so it's going to be even tougher for Aston Villa this season as it was compared to Newcastle last season. And on top of that, Konsa and Torres come with very little attacking threat as well. So I immediately went looking elsewhere for my replacements. Now, I did receive a couple of comments about the Chelsea lads of Colwill and Fofana, given their fixtures are decent for the next 6 fixtures or so. They are currently 5th on my fixture ticker. They have Wolves away, Palace at home, Bournemouth away, West Ham away. Quite a few away games there. Brighton at home, and then Nottingham Forest at home before it gets a bit tougher. They go away to Liverpool and then at home to Newcastle. So that's actually a decent run for Chelsea. Chelsea are usually a very strong team. However, in pre-season this year, Chelsea did not impress me at all. They were actually super leaky. They were actually super leaky, conceding lots of goals. And I don't actually fancy investing in them while they're learning a brand new system. Now, Chelsea are very much in flux at the moment. Who knows how long it's going to take them to settle under Maresca and the completely new system that they are trying to learn. Now, I do have some more thoughts on Chelsea specifically in my Nkunku section coming up after the Quansah replacement bit. So I'll go into a bit more depth about Chelsea. So stick around if you do want to hear about that. Now, City is a tough fixture, and I didn't see Chelsea do too much wrong. But then again, I also didn't see enough to make me rethink considering them for the upcoming fixtures. Now, Chelsea playing Man City, they were always going to set out with a bit more of a defensive mindset. I don't think they were going to come out the blocks and absolutely go at City, especially considering their pre-season form and the number of changes that seem to be happening within the squad. And so Chelsea were probably shaping up to be a little bit more defensive as it was against City anyway. And I expect that they will probably try to attack a lot more across these upcoming fixtures. And I think this is where we're going to start to see the holes in the defensive backline at Chelsea. So my gut says no on actually any sort of Chelsea investment right now, especially their defensive assets. Now, who knows? They've definitely got the fixtures to turn it around. It's 3 away fixtures in the next 4, though. So, yeah, it looks good on paper, but I'm not entirely certain that it's going to play out the way those fixtures look. So next on the list was Rico Lewis from Man City. Now, Rico Lewis would probably be my favourite pick He had an outstanding game against Chelsea. He was super high up the pitch, just all the time. I mean, he did drop back to defend when Chelsea did have the ball, but when City were building up with the ball being held in the back line, I mean, Rico Lewis is kind of playing like an inside cam, basically the same positioning that Palmer typically takes up in the Chelsea squad. Lewis had a great work rate all game, didn't seem to slow down at all, and looked pretty key to what City were doing in attack. However, I'm very worried about Kyle Walker taking Lewis's spot now that Walker has been back for a couple of weeks. Now, Walker was on the bench for the Chelsea match, but didn't make it onto the pitch, and he was one of those late players coming back from competitions in pre-season. In fact, Pep actually only made one substitution in the entire game, and that was Savinho, who was taken off for Foden, I think, at half-time, and that would look like it was mostly precautionary because Savinho did, in fact, take a whack in that first half. Now, very quick side note on Savinho. What talent! Holy hell, he had a superb game and was unfortunate to cop that whack that got him subbed off at half time. Man, Cucurella. So they started out with Doku on the right and Savinho on the left. And Cucurella was fronting up to mark Doku. And Cucurella had an outstanding game for Chelsea as well, by the way. He absolutely owned Doku for about that first 10, 15 minutes, or however long it was, until Doku and Savinho switched. It was clear that Doku was not winning out in the Cucurella challenge, and so he went over to the left side of the pitch, and Savinho came over to the right, and then Savinho ate Cucurella alive down that right wing. In fact, he actually ate about 3 Chelsea wingers down, or Chelsea defenders down that right wing when he had the ball at his feet in some instances throughout that match. But he is definitely one that is on the watch list, because if Savinho can earn his way into that City starting lineup, he looks like a phenomenal talent. But anyway, back to Walker. Walker is the club captain, so he is probably going to get a lot of minutes at City, making Rico Lewis probably a very short-term move, and I really am trying to find a player for this 4.5 million defensive spot that's going to stick for the long term here. There is a small chance that Walker could play right centre back instead of Akanji, leaving that right back spot solely for Lewis. And if I had already seen this lineup or seen this out on the pitch, then I would probably be a little bit more keen to roll the dice on Lewis. However, I have not seen this, and so I think there's just way too much risk purchasing Lewis here, even though I think Lewis will be FPL gold if he nails that spot down. But it is way more probable that Walker will come in for Lewis, with Lewis being probably favoured more heavily in the fixture congestion periods when external competitions are being played midweek. And so I discounted Rico Lewis pretty quickly, even though I think he is probably the best 4.5 million asset if he ends up becoming nailed. So next on the list was the most preferred candidate of Antonee Robinson. Sorry, most preferred out there seemingly in the community, and has probably been the most talked about replacement for Quansah. Now, I'm guessing he's probably one of the favourite picks of the models out there because he is nailed on. He did get some attacking returns last season, And I do see a lot of fixture tickers putting Fulham at the top of their tickers. Now, that's a little bit surprising to me, as I actually have Fulham all the way down in 12th spot on my fixture ticker. My fixture ticker doesn't actually do a total of the opponent's difficulty level. It actually does a delta, which is the difference between the team and their opponent. So the ranking here is Fulham versus Leicester, and Fulham versus Ipswich, and then Fulham versus West Ham as a difference in terms of delta, versus City versus Ipswich, City versus West Ham, and City versus Brentford. There's a much bigger gap in difficulty level there, and that's why those teams are higher up my fixture ticket. So Robinson earned 6 assists in the Premier League last season against Aston Villa, Wolves, Liverpool, Burnley, Aston Villa again, and Tottenham. So we actually got his assists against some pretty decent teams. Villa, Liverpool, Villa, and Tottenham. So not bad going at all. So back to the models. Those models did have some points projections. I'm not entirely sure how they're calculating those points projections, but they actually had players like Muric from Ipswich as the best 4.5 million keeper from the start of the season, and actually had Muric down with 7 points projected across the first 2 game weeks for Ipswich for Muric in goal. Those 2 games were against Liverpool and Man City. So figure that one out. Now, even though Fulham do have a great run of fixtures, now if I did order this fixture ticker, say by the next 5 game weeks, and put just their opponent's total as the main key driver, Fulham would be way higher up this fixture ticker. But you do also have to take into account how good the team is that's playing. And this is why I actually ended up deciding against Antonee Robinson. As I said, Fulham are 12th on my ticker. They are pretty low down. And so I do not actually see a hell of a lot of clean sheets coming from them. Like, how likely are Fulham to keep a clean sheet? I mean, Leicester and Ipswich, probably the best 2 shots. Leicester just scored against Spurs in the first game week of the season. West Ham, I suspect, are probably going to score. Newcastle are probably going to score. Nottingham Forest, it is away, so it is at Nottingham Forest's home ground. They could definitely score there. I know there's a lot of people out there with Chris Wood in their teams. And then they run into Man City and Aston Villa. And so Robinson does come with some attacking threat as well, but how likely are the Fulham lads to finish any of the assists that Robinson manages to tee up over this run of fixtures? So it was for these reasons that I actually discounted Antonee Robinson, and the player that I have gone with is actually Lewis Hall at Newcastle. Now, I know what you're thinking. Lewis Hall is pretty risky as a pick as well. And yeah, he does come with his risks. Now, first of all, Newcastle, out of the 5 teams of shortlisted assets that I've just gone through, I do think Newcastle actually have the best defense, excluding City, because I did talk about Rico Lewis. But I can't actually buy into City safely for 4.5 million, even though I would love to. And the next closest defensive team to Newcastle is probably Aston Villa in terms of defensive prospects. But like I mentioned, I do think the Champions League will actually have quite an effect on them, as they do not really have the squad depth to deal with all those very difficult additional fixtures that they will be playing. Now, Like I said, Hall is a little bit risky. He isn't nailed on, but I do think he is trying to break into the first team. Now, this is very much down to the final team sheet that Hal put out in preseason, and then the team sheet that lined up in game week 1. So the things that Hall has in his favour is he has good routes to points in attack, which is part of the reason why I'm taking the risk on him. He's on corners and he's on some dead balls. And he even took a shot from a dead ball free kick from a very acute angle against Southampton in game week 1, which weirdly went down as 0xg. So again, I've mentioned this before, but be very careful when you're relying solely on stats, as they can be very misleading. You do need to see what the player does and then what stats are produced by those models out there and figure out whether or not you think those numbers are correct. Now, Hall's main competition at left back, based on previous seasons, has been Dan Burn, as Dan Burn has basically been cemented in that left back spot. However, I think Eddie Howe wants to play Fabian Schär and Dan Burn as the centre-back pairing, given the last 2 team sheets. So that leaves that left-back spot wide open for Lewis Hall. Now, if I bring up just Newcastle alone, or I don't need to, I'll bring it up in a sec, but Newcastle are 6th on my fixture ticker, and they do have tricky games. The first tricky game is at home to Tottenham in game week 3, which is not ideal. Their 3 good games are all away from home: Bournemouth, Wolves, and Fulham, which is, again, not ideal because they're all away from home. They then have to play Man City at home, which is, again, not ideal. There's a lot of things that I'm saying that are not ideal here. Everton away, okay, potentially not ideal as well, but these are pretty easy fixtures. They just all happen to be away from home. Brighton will be pretty attacking. Chelsea will probably be pretty attacking. And then you've got Arsenal in game week 10. So it's a bit of a mixed bag from Newcastle. But they don't have any Europe to compete with this year. So I do think that they will be a lot more resolute. And Hall does come with all of that attacking upside. And also, I do have some rotation options with Newcastle. So if I bring in Newcastle and Southampton, because I do have Harwood Bellis on the bench, and I may even have to dip in to using him. As you can see here, I'm going to play Lewis Hall in pretty much every fixture, apart from maybe Tottenham next week, where I may opt to play Harwood Bellis away to Brentford, but that will very much be dependent on what happens in the Southampton fixture against Nottingham Forest in game week 2, when I can actually see Southampton playing against a team with 11 men. But when Lewis Hall has to play City in game week 6 and Arsenal in game week 10, Harwood Bellis has Bournemouth away and Everton at home. So I could very much be rotating Harwood Bellis in for those fixtures. And for pretty much every other fixture, I'm probably going to be playing Lewis Hall, probably even in this Tottenham fixture at home. Now, in terms of stats on Lewis Hall, in the final preseason game against Girona, he played 90 minutes. He then started in the first game against Southampton and played 69 minutes, being subbed off for Lloyd Kelly. Now, Newcastle were down to 10 men after only 28 minutes of the match, with Murphy, who's one of the wingers, was subbed off for a centre-back of Kraft so that Newcastle could still play with 4 at the back. And then they basically just went into, well, they then got a goal with 10 men, and then they basically looked like they just tried to shut the game down. So I'm not at all worried about the 69-minute substitution for Hall in that game, because when you are playing with 10 men, everyone has to do a lot more running on the pitch. And Lewis Hall is obviously just working his way into the team, and so his match fitness might not be there quite just yet. And in the previous seasons, the 23-24 season, so the season just gone, Lewis Hall only got 8 starts, 2 clean sheets and 1 goal. And then in the season previous, he got 8 starts and only 1 clean sheet. However, Lewis Hall was 19 last year and 18 years old the year previous, and is just about to turn 20 in about 5, and in the next week, I think. And so I think he's probably actually making his way into the team. This could have already been the season where Hall was given a real chance to own that left back spot, but with the injuries to Botman and Lascelles, he may now actually have to be relied upon to play that left back spot. Now, the only real threat to Lewis Hall at the moment is 2 things. One is they could play Dan Burn at left back and go with Fabian Schär and Kraft as the 2 centre backs. I think this is highly unlikely, given the first team sheet, but also Fabian Schär is suspended this week for his red card for headbutting Brereton Diaz. Wasn't really a headbutt, but using his forehead. But the main worry with Lewis Hall is Lloyd Kelly was purchased from Bournemouth as part of a free transfer. Now, I don't think Kelly is too much of a risk, as he only managed 19 starts last season for Bournemouth, with 25 appearances total, and he actually ended up getting quite a few 10-minute, 20-minute, 30-minute, and 40-minute appearances throughout the season. So he really didn't nail down a start at Bournemouth, and so I very much doubt he's going to become first choice at Newcastle. But of course, there is that risk there. I think what they've done is they've just purchased Lloyd Kelly as he can be a backup to both the left back and centre back spots, and given the injuries that Newcastle have, that seems like smart business. So I am gambling that Hall's spot is going to be secure, and that Kelly was only bought as bench cover, but I could definitely have that wrong. And it is very tough to go and buy another player that comes with a slight risk when I've just been burned by Quansah. But I can't let that unlucky break wreck my decision making on Hall. Now, if Quansah had paid like 2-3 game weeks and then got the boot, I'd be way more inclined to jump across to someone like Hall in 2-3 weeks' time, assuming that Hall had played the 2 or 3 weeks. And so just kind of go with my gut here, and I think Hall is breaking into the team. And so Lewis Hall is in. Fingers crossed he doesn't get the boot in the next week or 2. Now, he is very low down the preferred replacement for Quansah. As you can see here, he's only had 12,000 purchases compared to the 126,000 players that did sell Quansah. So the investment is definitely going elsewhere, and it does look like it's going into Antonee Robinson. So I do have a new differential in the squad. Right, so Nkunku owners beware. Man, this is already 28 minutes in. I didn't expect it to be like this long. I will try and get through this relatively quickly. So I hadn't had a chance to see the Chelsea vs City fixture in the last video, but I have since reviewed the 90 minutes, and I've got a much more serious warning for Nkunku owners than what I had already discussed during pre-season. Now, Chelsea line up in a 4-2-3-1 under Maresca, which then switches to a 3-2-4-1 when in possession of the ball. So to quickly read out the team sheet that started in game week 1, we had Sanchez in net, Gusto on the right, Fofana and Colwill as the centre-backs, and Cucurella, who had an immense game, starting at left-back. They had 2 CDMs of Caicedo and Lavia. Not Latvia, Lavia. Then on the right wing, we had Palmer, had Enzo Fernandez playing cam, and Nkunku at left wing, with Jackson playing up front. Now, Gusto was the man tasked with getting forward down the right wing, meaning that Palmer would tuck in and work closely with Enzo as the dual cams. So this is how it goes from a 4-2-3-1 to a 3-2-4-1. Nothing changes apart from Gusto coming up the pitch and Palmer moving slightly in field. Now, I mentioned that one of the reasons that helped me pick Jota over Nkunku was that I was worried about Nkunku's place in the team pre-season, given the team sheets that Maresca had rolled out. The City match made me even less sure of his place. So here's how my thinking progressed at the key moments of the Chelsea versus City match, specifically around Nkunku's 59-minute performance. Or was it 60? It might have been 59 and 60. So 5 minutes in, Nkunku is actually playing left wing. Great challenge in the box by Lewis, who had to scamper back to track Nkunku, who received a long ball over the top. Nkunku didn't manage to beat Lewis on this occasion. 5 minutes in. 26 minutes in, so there's a big gap in play there, about 20 minutes worth. Akanji, with a bad pass in a dangerous area, was basically tackled as he passed the ball. Akanji then recovers the ball, but then went down very easily, leaving Nkunku with the ball free in the box. Now, the ref awarded the foul to Akanji, but it was a super soft foul, and Nkunku could have been in on goal. But in that moment, before the ref awarded the foul, Nkunku chose to pass instead of looking for the shot when he was in a very good position to try and fashion a chance. So that's 20 minutes after figuring out he was playing at left wing. It's 26 minutes in. 39 minutes in. Decent team play by Chelsea there. Palmer with a long diagonal to Nkunku in the box. Nkunku nods it down to Jackson. Jackson, one touch, lays it off to Enzo. And Enzo's first time shot is blocked by Akanji. So Nkunku does do well here, but he's assisting the assister, and it's about the only thing that he has done in the first 40 minutes of the match. At the 45 plus 1 minute mark, this is an additional time in the first half, all of Nkunku's passes seem to be backwards. He also doesn't seem to want to take on Rico Lewis either. Then 5 minutes later, still an additional time in the first half. Great receive and turn by Jackson under pressure. He then sends a beautiful through ball out to Nkunku on the left in space. Nkunku heads towards goal, looks up for a pass when he's in a clear position to attack the goal again. Due to looking up twice, Nkunku has slowed the play right up, cuts in on his right foot, and hits a very timid shot straight into the defender standing right in front of him. He picks up the rebound and has another go trying to milk a penalty, but the main chance has already been lost. And then at the 59-minute mark, Nkunku is subbed off for Neto. Now, those were the key moments from Nkunku's performance against City. Now, two positions where he really should be getting his head down and attacking that goal, and he's actually looking for passes. Most of his passes are all going backwards, or he's assisting the assister. So, what I was talking about in my final team selection video in pre-season is I am really worried about where Nkunku will play in the team. Now, Maresca is trying him all over the park, indicating that he can't really find where to use him. I don't see how Nkunku fits in unless he becomes some sort of utility player. Now, I thought he played his best football in the cam role, but then Maresca tried out Dewsbury Hall in the cam role for the final game of pre-season. And then for the first game of the season, Maresca has preferred Enzo in the cam role. So Maresca clearly doesn't see Nkunku as a cam. Nkunku had also been playing the 9 in pre-season, but he was pretty much anonymous when he was playing in that position. And now he's been tried out at left wing, and he didn't want to do any of the things that a winger normally has to do, i.e. running at his man. I think he took on Lewis once, he lost the ball and never tried it again from his 60 minutes on the pitch. So I think his days of starting are probably numbered. To make matters worse, Chelsea have just brought João Felix back into the squad. Now, João Felix played mostly left wing at Barcelona, which is where Nkunku lined up against Man City. And Nkunku got subbed off for Pedro Neto, who was also another recent purchase for Chelsea. Pedro Neto usually plays on the right wing or right mid at Wolves, but did spend a few games playing left wing or left mid. I mean, most wingers can pretty much switch from left to right, right to left. There are some differences, but most of the skills are all the same skill set. Now I have absolutely no idea how Maresca will line up the front line now. Now I already wasn't too sure what he was going to do, but now with the additional personnel, it's tough. So my guess is it's going to be Sanchez in goal, the same backline, Gusto, Fofana, Colwill, and Cucurella from right to left. The two CDMs are probably going to be Lavia and either Caicedo or Enzo Fernandez. We've probably got Pedro Neto playing on the right, with Cole Palmer playing cam, and João Felix playing on the left, with Jackson playing up front. So where does that leave Nkunku? Will he play up front in front of Jackson? I don't think so. Jackson is doing a much better job in that number 9 role than what Nkunku has shown when he has been given that spot. Surely Nkunku doesn't keep Palmer out of the team at all. And Pedro Neto and João Felix are devastating wingers, and I very much doubt he can compete with them in either of the wing spots. Not to mention, Chelsea also have Sterling, Mudryk, and Madueke all sitting on the bench as basically just out-and-out wingers. Now, João Felix has only just been bought, so I don't think he's going to walk straight into the team. So maybe Nkunku gets a run out at left wing yet again, or maybe Pedro Neto is left off and Palmer plays on the right and he tries out Nkunku in that cam role. But if that was going to happen, I think you'd see Palmer on the right with Enzo Fernandez probably back in cam again, with João Felix out on the left, assuming that João Felix moves in. What I'm trying to say here is I think Nkunku will probably start this game. There is a severe risk that he doesn't start this game, but within the next couple of game weeks, I think he's probably going to be on the bench. Now, we will see how the team shapes up next week, the Chelsea team that is, but I would be very, very worried if I was, in fact, an Nkunku owner. And all right, well, that wraps up this video. Now, don't forget to like and subscribe and leave us a comment to tell us what you think. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all again next time.